Pen knelt behind a row of stacked crates, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. She peered through a narrow gap between the containers, watching the two enemy sentinels patrol the industrial warehouse. Their steps echoed through the hollow structure, each mechanical stomp reverberating in her chest. Her hands gripped her weapon tightly, feeling the cool metal against her palm. Every muscle in her body was tense, waiting. Timing would be crucial. If she moved too soon or too late, it would be over. She had the small drone hovering above the sentinels, its blinking lights scanning the area for any signs of movement. She had no time to wait for backup. She was on her own, and she knew it. Her moment came when one of the sentinels turned its back toward her, exposing a weak spot in its armor. Without hesitation, Pen leaped out from behind the crates. Her gun fired 3 rapid shots, each one hitting its mark. The first shot stunned the target, the second immobilized it, and the third ended its fight. The sentinel collapsed, its circuits shorted out. The second sentinel reacted instantly, spinning toward her. It advanced with precision, its heavy footfalls echoing through the warehouse. Pen was already moving, sprinting toward another stack of crates, diving behind them as a burst of gunfire erupted, sparks flying off the metal. "Not fast enough," she muttered under her breath, clutching her wounded left hand. The pain was sharp, but she pushed it aside. She couldn't slow down now. She needed a new plan. The second sentinel was relentless, closing in on her. Pen could feel the vibrations in the ground as it moved, its sensors scanning for her. She glanced around the space, spotting an open hallway to the east. It wasn't ideal, but it might give her a better chance. If she could lure the sentinel into a confined space, its size would work against it. She just had to be faster. Pen darted from her cover, zigzagging between scattered debris. The sentinel's targeting system struggled to keep up as she reached the narrow hallway. She barely made it through when the sentinel slammed into the entry, trying to force itself into the tight space. Pen dropped low and slid across the concrete, bringing her hatchet up as she passed underneath the machine's bulk. The blade struck home, slicing into the exposed joint of its leg. It staggered, but didn't fall. This thing was tougher than she expected. The sentinel spun, its massive arms swinging toward her. Pen rolled, narrowly avoiding the blow as it smashed into the wall, leaving a dent in the concrete. She pushed herself to her feet, pain shooting through her limbs, but she didn't stop. Her right hand found her gun again, and she fired a series of precise shots at the sentinel's joints, trying to weaken it further. Sparks flew, but the machine kept advancing. It lunged for her, its claw outstretched. Pen dodged, but the machine's arm clipped her shoulder, spinning her off balance and sending her crashing to the floor. Her vision blurred, her head spinning, but she forced herself up. The sentinel loomed over her, ready to deliver the final blow. Just as it raised its arm, a loud explosion rocked the warehouse. Pen flinched, her ears ringing from the sudden blast. The sentinel paused, turning toward the source of the noise. In the distance, through the smoke and dust, Pen saw movement. 3 more sentinels had entered the fray. But these were different. Sleeker, faster, and more lethal. Pen gritted her teeth. This wasn't going to be easy. Before she could react, the sleek sentinels moved in, engaging both Pen and the remaining sentinel in a blur of motion. Pen barely had time to scramble for cover as the machines clashed. Sparks flew, metal ground against metal, and the sound of heavy impacts filled the air. Pen watched, stunned, as one of the new sentinels dismantled the old, tearing it apart with swift, precise strikes. But these new arrivals weren't here to help her. One of the sleek sentinels turned its attention toward her, its red sensors locking onto her position. Pen's heart raced as she realized she had mere seconds to act. She bolted from her hiding spot, diving behind a stack of crates as the new sentinel opened fire. The shots whizzed past her, missing by inches. She rolled to her feet, clutching her hatchet and gun, knowing this fight had just become even more dangerous. She needed a new strategy. Fighting 1 sentinel was hard enough, but 3? That was impossible, at least by herself. Suddenly, her radio crackled to life. "Pen! Hold tight. We're on our way." It was backup, but she didn't know how long they'd take to arrive. Her time was running out, and she had to hold her ground until they got there. Pen made a split-second decision, sprinting toward a nearby stairwell. She needed higher ground to buy herself more time. As she ran, the sentinels pursued her, their heavy footsteps thundering behind her. She could feel the heat of their targeting systems on her back as she ascended the stairs, taking 2 at a time. Her muscles burned, and every breath felt like fire, but she couldn't afford to stop. At the top of the stairs, she found herself in a control room overlooking the entire warehouse. It was a dead end, but it gave her a better vantage point. She quickly scanned the room and spotted an old control panel. Wires hung loose, but it was still connected to the massive overhead cranes suspended from the ceiling. It was risky, but it might be her only shot. Pen smashed her elbow into the control panel, hoping to trigger something. The lights flickered, and she heard the hum of machinery. One of the cranes began to move, its massive arms swinging toward the sleek sentinels below. The machines were relentless, but they weren't prepared for what came next. With a deafening crash, the crane's claw swung down and smashed into one of the sentinels, crushing it beneath its weight. Pen watched as the second sentinel tried to dodge, but the crane clipped its leg, sending it off balance. It stumbled but didn't fall. The third sentinel, realizing the danger, began targeting the crane instead of her. Pen knew she didn't have much time before they adapted. She grabbed her hatchet, preparing for the inevitable fight. With one of the sleek sentinels down and another wounded, she had a chance. She sprinted back down the stairwell, determined to finish what she had started. As she reached the floor, she could see the wounded sentinel trying to repair itself, its damaged limbs sparking. Penn charged at it, her hatchet raised. The machine turned, too slow to stop her as she drove the blade deep into its exposed circuits. Sparks flew as the sentinel collapsed in a heap, its systems shorted out. The third and final sentinel turned toward her, its red sensors glowing ominously. Penn's breath caught in her throat, but she stood her ground. This was it, the last fight. Just as the sentinel advanced, a barrage of gunfire filled the air. Penn turned to see her backup finally arrive, soldiers in gray urban camo flooding the room. They fired on the final sentinel, their precision shots tearing through its armor until it collapsed in a shower of sparks. Penn stood there, panting, her muscles trembling with exhaustion. The fight was over. The soldiers approached her, one of them offering a hand. "You did good, Penn," the soldier said, his voice steady. "We wouldn't have made it without you." Penn gave a weak smile, wiping the sweat from her brow. "About time you showed up." The soldier chuckled, looking around at the wreckage. "You handled yourself pretty well. Let's get out of here. More are probably on the way." Penn nodded, her body aching but her resolve stronger than ever. She had survived this battle, but the war was far from over. As she walked toward the exit, her hatchet still in hand, she glanced back at the destroyed sentinels. This was just the beginning.